Oh, there you go. You coming now. Let's see. I don't see you on camera yet. Oh, there you go.
Oh, I see you now. I love that turban. Wow. Wow. That's gorgeous.
Oh, thank you. Oh.
Okay. All right. Now I'm talking on the telephone, on the net instead of the telephone. Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Blue picture on the wall. That's beautiful.
Oh, thank you. You know, that cost me $10 at a flea market.
Next time you go, buy me one. That's a really beautiful picture. That's lovely.
Thank you.
That's lovely. I thought maybe you painted it yourself, but it's still lovely.
Oh, thank you. No, yeah, I found that and I said, oh my goodness, I love blue. Blue is very tranquil.
Yep.
You said you went to go visit one of your old homes?
Well, not an old home. There's another way to put it.
Oh.
The land on which I was. There's no house there anymore because my father had it bulldozed into the ground because that's where I was born and raised, and the spirit of my relatives are over there.
Oh, awesome. Well, that's good. I'm glad that you were able to go.
I'm glad it's still there. I'm fighting to keep it there. It's a century farm. It's been in the family for over 100 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yes, it is. And that's going to be the farm where Jane Elliott was born, you understand. Someday it'll be a national scenic route. It'll be on the road where all these famous people happen. What happened here? Oh, that witch that did that exercise in high color. Oh, I know who you're talking about. And they'll throw things at it. Oh, well.
Throw things at it.
They will. I know they will. But that's the reason we don't care if the house is gone. Now they can't break the windows.
We breaking bread, yeah. We breaking bread, yeah. We breaking bread, yeah. One conversation at a time. We breaking bread, yeah. We breaking bread, yeah. We breaking bread, yeah. One conversation at a time.
The Breaking Bread Village.
One conversation at a time.
The Breaking Bread Village.
One conversation at a time.
Well, we are ready to get started. You got your water?
Yeah, I'm all ready. I got my water, brushed my hair a little bit, what little hair I have, and here we go.
Well, I just wanted to just let you know that I'm really excited for you being here today and taking some time for me to just kind of talk. I have literally followed you my whole life in regards to the work that you do. I've always been really, I don't know, I just always admired it and really loved it. And so I just wanted to kind of talk to you about it today.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and talk about it. That's about all I know is what I've done for the last 52 years.
And when I looked at some of the videos, I saw that you did it right after MLK was assassinated. Can you kind of tell me what sparked that in you to feel the need or the urgency to do that experiment?
I can, but I hate to, because that was it really was one of the worst 2 days of my life. It was the day my little sister died when she was 3 and I was 10. That was horrible. And then the Second World War was on, and then the Korean War, and then the Vietnam War, and all those things paled in comparison to what I felt when Martin Luther King Jr. was killed. Because for me, Martin Luther King Jr. represented hope. And for me, the word hope is an acronym for holding on to positive energy. And that's what Martin Luther King did. He held on to positive energy, even when he knew they were going to kill him. They couldn't scare him to death. They could kill him, but they couldn't scare him to death, and they couldn't stop him. And he had been one of our heroes of the month in February, along with, unfortunately, George Washington, who owned slaves, bought and sold people for money. But we didn't study that part of George Washington in our social studies class. We studied the fact that he was the father of our country, and he never told a lie. Now think of what the kids are going to learn in the future about our present president. Okay. He isn't the father of our country, and he's never told the truth. So look at the difference in those two men. Both of them had money, one of them had sense. It was amazing. And Abraham Lincoln was one of our heroes of the month. And I didn't know at that time that Abraham Lincoln, according to people who know these things now, was a Melungeon. He was part black, he was part white, and he was part Cherokee Indian. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
No, that's something we don't teach in school because we don't want to admit that our first black president was Abraham Lincoln. So we have to pretend that never happened. And then we studied, and one of our heroes of the month was Daniel Boone, who was famous for killing Native Americans and taking their land. That's not the story we told about him. We told that he was a famous pioneer. He was famous for killing people. And then there was Davy Crockett. And he was famous because he died killing Mexicans as we tried to take over part of their land. Those were our heroes of the month in February, and that was racist teaching. But I wouldn't have thought that it was racist teaching at that time. I thought that was American history. That is American hysteria. That is American his story. It isn't the truth. It's just a story to make little white kids feel good about their background and about their so-called history. Martin Luther King Jr. was our hero of the month in February. We had made a teepee. My previous year's third graders had made a teepee. That's a fun experience out of old sheets. And you don't have time to hear that. But anyway, we had made it. We had put it up in the classroom the previous year. And then when the unit was over, I took it down and rolled it up and put it back in the cupboard. So then when I went home that day, a year later, I had the teepee under my arm. I was going to wash it, dry it, iron it, and take it back to school the next morning. We were going to paint Indian symbols on it. So I went through the back door of my house and the telephone was ringing. I answered the telephone. It was my sister. And she said, "Is your television on?" I said, "No." She said, "You better turn it on." I said, "Why?" She said, "Because they shot him." I said, "Who did we shoot this time?" Because we had been shooting people fairly regularly. And she said, "Martin Luther King Jr."
Oh, wow. Okay.
And then it wasn't funny anymore. Then it wasn't, "Who did we shoot this time?" Then it was, "Oh my God, this can't be true." And I turned on television and it was true. And there were the pictures of him lying on his back, bleeding to death, while they were pointing at the person who was in the window, at the window where the person was who shot him. That was without a doubt the worst day of my life up until the time my husband died, because that Martin Luther King Jr. wanted to make living better for all of us in this country, not just for Black people, but for all of us. So I washed and dried the teepee. I laid it out on the living room floor. I was ironing it and watching television. And there was Walter Cronkite with 3 Black males saying to those men, "When our leader was killed, his widow held us together. Who's going to keep your people in line?" And I thought, are you insane? When our leader was killed, Martin Luther King Jr., he wasn't just one of them. And our leader, JFK, wasn't the leader only of white people. He was the leader of all of us. When our leader was killed, his widow held us together. See how civilized we are. One young woman could hold us together. Who's going to keep your people in line? As if Black people weren't my people.
Right.
You're my people. The U.S. spells us, and it means all of us. And I was absolutely furious. So I changed the channel, and there was Dan Rather saying to 3 leaders of the Black community, "Don't you Negroes think you should feel sympathy with white people, because we can't feel the anger at this killing that you Black people can?" And I thought, that's it. I'm not listening to any more of this nonsense, and I am not going to put up the teepee tomorrow, since we were going to learn the Sioux Indian prayer that says, "Oh, great Spirit, keep me from ever judging a man until I've walked a mile in his moccasins." I was going to teach them that prayer the next day, and I was going to arrange to have it answered for them, because I was going to do what Hitler did. I was going to pick out a group of people on the basis of a physical characteristic over which they had absolutely no control. I was going to say ugly things about them. I was going to treat them as though all the ugly things I was saying were absolutely true. I was going to force them to live down to my expectations of them. And when they did, I was going to say, "See, you people are like that. President's models for how to govern a country." And that's the reason some of the things that he's doing are so familiar to me. They are so familiar to me because he learned them from reading the writings of Adolf Hitler. You need to realize that that's what's going on right now. And he's very serious about that. My husband came home from work at that time. He was working nights in a tractor factory. And he said, they shot him, didn't they? I said, yeah, they did. He said, what are you going to do, Jane? I said, I'm going to separate my students according to the color of their eyes tomorrow and let some of them find out how it feels to be treated badly because of a physical characteristic over which you have no control. He said, you'll lose your job. I said, if I lose my job for doing the right thing, I want to lose my job. He said, Jane, you can't do that. These kids need those wages that you're making. I said, hey, I'll find another way to make money. I will not allow this to go on without teaching my third graders about the ugliness of racism. He said, well, you're going to regret it. So we went to bed. And I said the only prayer I ever said at that time, which was, oh, Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace. I said it over and over like a mantra. Oh, Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace. Within 5 minutes after I started that exercise the next morning, I learned something very valuable. Be very, very careful what you pray for, because you might get it. If I had known that my parents would lose the people who raised the town's exercise, known that my husband would lose the respect of all those people that he drove back and forth to work with because he couldn't control his wife and couldn't keep her from teaching of rightness of whiteness exercise. If I had known that my forts are going to be, their belongings were going to be destroyed by the parents of their peers and by their teachers because they had an N-word lover for a mother, I would have done that exercise. If I had known that no teacher would speak to me for 12 years where they could be seen speaking to me because it wasn't good politics to be seen talking to the N-word lover, if I had known that was going to happen, I might have done the exercise sooner, because I found out that I had a lot more time to teach when I was no longer included in their hall conferences. And my internal environment was a lot less polluted when I no longer had to listen to their racist, sexist, ageist, homophobic, ethnocentric remarks. So the next morning I got up, I got ready for school. Daryl was feeding the kids when I left, and he said, are you going to do that thing? I said, yes, I am. He said, you're going to be sorry. I said, well, I'd be sorrier if I didn't do it. I will not leave my principles at the schoolhouse door. And he said, you may find out that your principles are too expensive, Jane. Well, I said, we'll find out, won't we? So I went to school with tears in my eyes because this was the man who was supposed to support me in whatever I did. Yeah. He was my absolutely my strength. He was everything to me. And he was letting me know that he couldn't trust me to do the right thing at this point. I was really quite upset about that. So I went to school, got ready for the day. The first student in the room, Stephen Armstrong, came in and said, hey, Elliott, they shot that king last night. Why'd they shoot that king, Miss Elliott? I said, we're going to talk about that, Stephen. So after we had done the things you have to do first thing in the morning, first we said the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag with the words under God in it. They do not belong in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. They weren't in there until Dwight Eisenhower became president of the United States. Before that, the words under God were to get President Eisenhower to put the words under God into the pledge. It doesn't belong there. We have a lot of kids in school who don't believe in praying publicly, and we have some kids whose parents are atheists at all. But once they get into our classroom, they have to do something whether their parents like it or not. So after we did that, then we sang God Bless America, which is a hymn. Make no mistake about this. This is a hymn. But we sang it because it was wonderful. What did you do? Don't break anything there. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay.
Hey, get out of there and close the door, please. No, it isn't okay. Because if something drops, then I'll have to scream at you anyway. And I don't want to scream at a guest in my house. If she were my granddaughter, I'd be saying, "Get your hands out of there!" But she's a guest. So anyway, so we did that, and then we started to talk about the killing of Martin Luther King Jr. And they told me, I said, "What do kids know about Black people?" And they knew every negative stereotype I'd ever heard, and some that I had never heard. I finally said, "How do you kids know these things are true?" And they said, every one of them, because my dad said so. And then they went into a litany of what their dads had told them about Black people. And these kids had never been in the presence of a person of color other than pale faces. I said, have you kids any idea how it would feel to be something other than white in this country? No. I said, would you like to know? Yeah. I said, would you like to do something today that will help you know that? Yeah. It was like we've already gotten out of spelling and handwriting. Get this broad talk and we don't have to learn anything all day long. Every student does it. You know it, and I know it. So I said, okay, today we're going to judge people by the color of their eyes. And since I'm blue-eyed, and most of the students in this room are blue-eyed people are going to be on the bottom the first day. And they said, what do you mean? I said, I mean, blue-eyed people are as smart as brown-eyed people. They aren't as clean as brown-eyed people. They aren't as civilized as brown-eyed people. You give blue-eyed people something nice, and what do? Immediately said, they tear it up. They don't take care of things. I thought, oh my God, wow. These kids know how this works.
Yeah.
And there, at that point, these all white Christian kids in this all Christian community. At that point, little brown-eyed Debbie sitting in the front row looked up at me and said to me, how come you're the teacher here if you got them blue eyes?
Oh.
And I thought, there it is.
Wow,
right there it is.
Wow.
That child knows how to do this. Now, as a result of me starting this exercise, she has the power to challenge her teacher. And she's 9 years old. And she has that power. And I put the thing together so I couldn't say, how dare you talk to me that way? This was all my idea. Mm-hmm. And then blue-eyed Alan Moss in the back row stood up and said, Debbie, if she didn't have them blue eyes, she'd be the principal or the superintendent. And I thought, and there it is again. Wow. He's defending me, not as his teacher, but as a member of his race. If my eye color makes me inferior, then his eye color, which was the same as mine, might make him inferior. He had to let everybody know that eye color had nothing to do with it. I was just naturally incompetent. It wasn't my fault. It was my eye color. It was like, oh my God, I have created a microcosm of society in a third grade classroom. And I've got the kids that'll go along to get along. And I had nobody that year who would say, Mrs. Elliott, you're wrong. Not one of them that year or the next year said, Mrs. Elliott. But the third year, one of the little boys said, you can't make me do that. He's my friend and I won't treat him that way. I said, fine. So you're going to be, one in all the years I've done this.
Wow.
When I do it with adults, if an adult doesn't like it, they get up and leave. And it's always a blue-eyed person who leaves. And I say to the rest of the group, now let's think about what just happened here. He didn't like the way he was being, and it's usually a male. He didn't like the way he was being treated for half an hour because of a physical characteristic over which he has no control. He can go outside this room and it won't happen to him outside this room. If he stays, it'll happen to him. He has the choice. He can stay and learn something about this, how it feels to be in this situation, or he has the freedom to leave. And how many of you, and I say to this members of the group, how many of you people of color would like to walk out and never have to experience this again? Mm-hmm. And one black man said to us one day, let me make a bargain with you, Mrs. Elliott. I said, what is it? He said, I'll take discrimination based on the color of my skin for one day, no matter how bad it gets, if you promise I'll never have to have it again as long as I live in this country.
Wow.
I said, what you just said is the most important and that is the most important and meaningful sentence I will ever hear. Mm-hmm. I'll stand one day of that kind of abuse if I never have to have it again based on the color of my skin. Just do it to me for one day and then guarantee that it'll never happen again. Now, those little blue-eyed kids knew it was going to happen to them for one day with one teacher in that classroom, and it wasn't they weren't going to get it from any of the other teachers or any of the other students or the administrators or any of the people in the town. And it was going to end at the end of the day. When is it going to end for Black and Native American people in this country? It will end when melanemic people, and they are melanemic because if you don't get enough iron in your blood, you become anemic. So if you don't have enough melanin in your skin, you become melanemic. So instead of calling them white, we might as well call them what they are, which is melanemic. It isn't going to end for Black people in this country until those of us who have the power put a stop to it. And we have the power to do that now. Anyway, the horrible things happened in my classroom that morning. So at noon, I went down to the teacher's lounge. I needed some support. I needed somebody to say to me, Jane, it's all right. So I walked into the teacher's lounge. The other 2 third grade teachers were there and a number of other teachers. And I told them what was happening in my classroom. The day after Martin Luther King Jr. was killed, when I finished telling them what was going on, the younger of those 2 teachers, who was about 52 at the time, I think, said, I don't know how you have time for all that extra stuff. It's all I can do to teach reading, writing, and arithmetic. Well, she hadn't taught reading, writing, and arithmetic yet because I listened to how she was doing it. And those kids were not learning reading, writing, and arithmetic. They were parroting what she wanted them to say. The other one said, She had been teaching for over 30 years, had been molding young minds in schools in that county for over 30 years. And she said, on the day after Martin Luther King was killed, in reaction to what I told her, I don't know why you're doing that. I thought it was about time somebody shot that son of a bitch.
Oh, wow.
Nobody gasped. Nobody said, Helen, you could lose your job for that. Nobody said, God is love, Helen. Nobody said, insomuch as ye have done it unto one of these, my brethren, so have ye done it unto me. Nobody said, judge not that ye be not judged. They were all either smiling or laughing and nodding because she had expressed their feelings perfectly. And as the most senior member of the group, she had the most right to do so. At that moment, I decided that no person of any age will ever leave my presence with those attitudes unchallenged. I may not be able to change your attitude, but I can challenge your attitude, and you have to prove to me that so-called white people are superior, and you can't do it because it isn't true. Now, if you really think it is, and then we could go through a whole litany of just about 15 things that we have because of the efforts and the intelligence of Black people. And the first thing we would have to deal with is human beings. The first modern human beings that evolved on this earth were Black, and they evolved in sub-Saharan Africa between 300,000 and 500,000 years ago. And within several thousand years after they appeared on the earth, all of Java man, all of Peking man, and all of Neanderthal man disappeared from the face of the earth because those Black Homo sapiens were so strong that they were able to take whatever you threw at them and keep on keeping on. And that's the people we call white in this country are actually Blacks who faded, because the farther those Black people moved from the equator, the less and less they were exposed to sunlight. So the less and less melanin their bodies produced. So their skin, their hair, and their eyes got lighter. That's the only reason I have skin this color, is because my ancestors moved farther from the equator and moved to Ireland and England, and there wasn't much sunlight there. So their bodies didn't produce as much melanin, and their bodies had to take advantage of that sun as much as they could. If I trace my DNA back far enough, and I will, in the next month, I'll get my DNA traced back as far as it'll go, because if I do, I'll find out that there is a percentage of my DNA that came from a country and on the continent of Africa. There is no doubt about that. So when people say to me, well, I'm biracial, I say, oh, really? Which of your parents came from outer space? Well, what do you mean? Well, I'm sorry, but if your parents came from the earth, you are not biracial, because there's only one race on the face of the earth. And when the news people say, and this is a multiracial crowd who are involved, people who are involved in these protests, this is a multiracial group. No, it isn't, unless some of them came from Mars. And I don't think any of them did. I'm not sure about the president. He might have come from Mars, but I don't think so. I think his great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandparents mated with a Neanderthal. And you can always tell a Neanderthal because they're bulky and they're inclined to abdominal fat, and they are bullish and brutish and have orange hair. So, he fits all the characteristics, but we won't talk about that because I know lots of red-haired people. Some of my best friends are red-haired. One of the best friends I have in Sun City, California, says she had an uncle who was a Neanderthal. So come on. It's not that I dislike Neanderthals. It's just that some of them need to be educated, but it's difficult to educate them because some of them don't want to learn. Anyway, so I went back to my room. Determined that we would finish the day with the blue-eyed people on the bottom, the brown-eyed people on the top. In the middle of the afternoon that day, I pulled down the map, the roller map. The ring slipped off my thumb. The map went around and around and around the roller the way it does in that old Excedrin commercial, which you have never seen. And I said, well, I've done it again. And little brown-eyed Debbie, sitting in the front row, looked up at me and said, well, what do you expect? You've got blue eyes, haven't you? Wow. And as God is my judge, I can still see the picture I had in my mind's eye that day. I could see myself backhanding that little brown-eyed witch against the wall. I wanted her to fly through the wall, fly through the air, hit the wall, slide down like a broken egg. And I wanted to be at the bottom when she got there. I was furious at her. And then I was furious at me. I was hired to protect her if I couldn't teach her anything. And I wanted to do her great physical damage because of a remark that she made to me in an exercise. And this is not an experiment. Do not call it an experiment. People call this an experiment in order to discredit it. So when somebody says that's an experiment, then you say to them, wait a minute. If what she did when she created a microcosm of society in her third grade classroom and treated people badly or well on the basis of the color of their skin, if that's an experiment, then we have been doing an experiment with black and brown people in this country for the last 400 years. Do you want to cop to that, fool? And they'll say, you don't understand. And you say, oh, but I do understand. When somebody does it to white children, it's an experiment. When people do it to children of color in this country for 400 years, it's reality. We need to put a stop to it. It is illegal and it is unethical to experiment with people without their knowledge and without their permission. And if what I do during that exercise is an experiment, then what we have been doing in this country is an experiment, and we better put a stop to it. I finally turned those kids loose that night, and they were glad to go home. I went up to the hotel that my mother and father lived in. I told them what was happening. Told my mother what was happening. She said, Jane, you better be careful. You don't want to end up where Aunt Eunice did. I said, where did Aunt Eunice end up? In a mental institution. Because what I was describing sounded insane. But when you describe the way we behave and the way we treat people in the United States of America, it defies logic. It sounds insane. There is no logic in treating people positively or negatively on the basis of the amount of a chemical in their skin. It makes no sense. And if you think it does, then you need to get this magazine. April 2018, National Geographic magazine. See these girls?
Yeah.
They have a black father and a pale-faced mother. Now, are these girls biracial?
Based on what you just said, no.
Thank you. Thank you very much. You see, some learning has taken place here. These girls are not biracial. They are mosaic. A mosaic is an art form that is new and beautiful and made up of many different elements. And that's what these two girls are. They're young, they're new, they're beautiful, they're a new person, and they are made up of many different elements, but they are both members of the same race as their parents, which was the human race. These girls are members of the human race. Now, after you look at that, then you turn to this page in this magazine, and you see this map?
Yes.
This map shows where human beings started and how we moved from there. Those black people, without any modern technology, moved from there to inhabit and to populate every landmass on the face of the earth. And we say black people aren't as smart as, aren't as creative as, aren't as courageous as, aren't as curious as we are. They are more of every one of those things than we are. You need to realize that. Your kids have the right, if you have children, if you don't have children, do it for your nieces and nephews. Get this map blown up, have it laminated, and insist that the teachers hang it on the wall of the building so that they have to see the truth instead of the lie that we have been teaching them all our lives. I finally went home. I was afraid that there'd be a cross burning in my front yard because I knew I'd done a bad thing. Nobody came anywhere near us. There's a long story with that. You don't want to hear it. And so then Monday, I went back into my classroom. I was scared to death to go back into my classroom because I was sure that those blue-eyed boys were going to get even, because I heard them in the boys' room saying, we're going to take care of those brownies when it's our turn to be on top. And they couldn't wait to get even. So, yeah, you know, that's what blacks are accused of all the time. You just want to get even.
Yeah.
You're just playing the race card. Yeah, you want to get even. Okay. So into my classroom, we reversed the exercise. Brown-eyed people were on the bottom. Blue-eyed people were on the top. The blue-eyed people were much less vicious to the brown-eyed people than the brown-eyed people had been to them. And on Tuesday, before we discussed the exercise at all, each child had to write a 4-paragraph composition telling who Martin Luther King Jr. was, how the child felt on Friday, how the child felt on Monday, and what discrimination is. When they got done writing, and only after they got done writing, we got in a circle, in the magic circle, and I said, now, whatever you say in the magic circle is acceptable. Now, why didn't you blue-eyed boys get even with these brown-eyed kids? You said you were going to. I heard you say it. And they said, because we found out how it feels to be treated that way. And we didn't want to make our friends feel the way we did when we were on the bottom. Now, if we could just convince melanemic people of the idea that the vast majority of people of color don't want to get even. They want to get equity. They wanted what they're promised in the Constitution, but you got to take out that part of the Constitution that says that a slave is 3/5 of a person. We've got to get that out of the Constitution, and we've got to get equality and equity back in the Constitution. I think that's what they want. I didn't realize how severely how true that was until a year and a half ago. I was on a program with Angela Davis at Houston, the University of Houston.
Yeah.
And they brought Angela Davis in, and she did her thing, and they brought me, and I did. And then they said to me, we came in together, and they introduced her first, and she said wonderful, beautiful, marvelous things. She's a brilliant person. And then they said, Mrs. Elliott, do you have something you want to say? I said, well, yeah, as a matter of fact, I do. We're going to talk about race, aren't we? Yes. All right. Well, every person in this room who considers himself or herself a member of the human race, please stand. They all stood up and looked around like, is she kidding? And I said, there, you see, we're all members of the same race. Now, since we're all members of the same race, and our ancestors evolved on the earth between 300,000 and 500,000 years ago, we are also all 30th to 50th cousins. So now everybody turn to the person on your left, stick out your right hand and say, hello, cousin. And they all did it. And then they started to laugh. And then they started to visit with one another. Now, you wouldn't dare do that now because we've got Trump virus. So we can't do that now. But if I were doing it now, I'd say, everybody, give the person next to you your left elbow or your right elbow. And let's see if you're going to elbow a greeting to one of your cousins on the right or your left. And then after you do it, they're all just laughing and chuckling. And there's one white woman down in the front row, and she said, aren't they going to want to get even with us? I said, what did you say? I think they want to get even with us. I said, you're talking about black people. Well, yes, don't they want to get even? I said, let's find out. Well, every person in this room who considers himself or herself a member of the black color group, please, and if you want to get even, if you're a member of the black group and you want to get even with all white folks, please stand. 3 young black males stood. The rest of them, and half the audience was black, and the rest of them just looked at him like, are you out of your tree? What's your problem? And I said, you see, they don't want to get even with all of us. Are you more comfortable with that? Well, yeah, she thought that was kind of nice. I said, now, however, let's be honest about this. Well, every person who considers himself or herself black in this room and who wants to get even with 1 or 2 white people, please stand. They all leaped to their feet, cheering and laughing and high-fiving one another and just tickled to death because for once in their life, they had the right to say, yeah, I want to get even with 1 or 2. And then now this woman's scared again. I said, now, here it is. If you want to be treated fairly in the future, all you have to do is behave properly in the present. Behave in such a way that you aren't one of the 1 or 2 that they want to get even with. Does that make sense to you? And she said, well, I said, the group, does that make sense to you? And they all cheered. That made sense to them. That makes sense to me. If you don't want to be treated fairly in the future, treat people fairly in the present. Do not leave a bad taste in their mouth. That could make all the difference in the world. It was that night with Angela Davis was one of the most interesting times I have had in a very long time, because after it was over, we were out in the hall doing selfies and the things you do. And I went to where Angela Davis was, and she said, Jane, you and I could go on the road together. I said, Angela, tell me when you want to go, and I'm on the road. We'll do it. And she laughed, and I laughed, but she was half serious, and so was I, because a black woman who has been in prison and who knows it all, and a white woman who knows nothing but is willing to learn. And that's exactly what I am. I'm a pale-faced woman who doesn't know anything, but I'm willing to learn. And I'll listen to people of color as long as they will tell me the truth about what's going on for them. Because I know that the truth about what's going on for them is not the same as the truth about what's going on for me. I know that. And when I have a white male stand on my left and a black female stand on my right, and we talk about differences, When it's done, what we have proven that white male has power because of his height, because of his gender, because of his age, and because of the color of his skin. And that black woman, no matter how many degrees she has, and no matter how brilliant she is, doesn't have power in any of those areas, not because of the color of her skin, but because of the ignorance of those of us who see skin color as an indicator of intelligence or of our worth as a human being. Every time I do that exercise, height is mentioned first, then gender, then age, and the last thing they'll say is color. And you know, and I know that the first thing they see is skin color. But they don't want to admit they see that difference. Has anybody ever walked up to you and said, when I see you, I don't see you black?
Yes.
Have you had that experience?
Oh yeah, all the time.
Yes. And you say, thank you very much. I'm so glad you are willing to ignore my unfortunate coloration. No, what do you say?
No, I do not say that. I ask them to see me. I ask them to see me. Yeah. Because we see each other.
But
I mean,
when somebody
see it. Yeah.
When somebody says that around me, I say to them, you have just denied the existence of the largest organ inch by inch on her body or his body. And the fact that you've decided that you're going to pretend you don't see it. If you didn't see her or him black, you wouldn't say, when I see you, I don't see you black. You'd say, when I see you, I don't see you green. I don't see you white. I don't see you yellow. But they see you black, and you aren't black. You are a shade of brown, just like all the rest of us are. And I am a shade of several shades of brown because my skin doesn't do the right thing. So I am several shades of brown, just like everybody else on the face of the earth is. We have got to stop these ridiculous statements. Go to my website. Somebody will say, well, you brought us a lot of problems and you didn't bring us any solutions. Go to my website. Download the printed learning materials. A woman named, and I can never remember her name. Just a minute now. I will. A woman named Judith Katz.
Okay.
Judith Katz, Katz. Judith Katz wrote a book called White Awareness. And she allowed me to put 3, 4, 5 pages out of that book on my website. And the first page is a set of typical statements that white folks make that think they aren't being racist. Oh my God. You read through those and you check those which you have heard or with which you would agree. Then you turn to the next page, which is a set of clarifications of those statements, how those are heard by the person who's on the receiving end of it. When I see you, I don't see you black. Right. Or this one, you talk real good for a black person. Yes. Number one is bad grammar. Yes. Number 2, it's a racist thing to say. Stop it. And you find out why you don't say that on the next page. Then the third page is a set of commitments to combat racism. Go through those, and everybody should do this. Not just pale faces, but everybody, because we all have learned the same ridiculous stuff. So you go through that and check the things that you have done, yes, and those that you haven't done, you check no. And then you go back and circle one that you check no, put the date beside it, and do it for a month. Put the paper away and do that one thing for a month. Take it out at the end of the month. Put a circle, circle the date on the calendar so that you know, okay, this is the date I've got to, oh dear, I've got to do what that witch told me to do. All right, I'm going to do it, Elliott. And I'll be there. I will be in your head and you will do this. And then you look at check what the one you did, write some notes to yourself about what you learned by doing it and what an effect it had on other people and on yourself, and then choose another one. By the time you've gone through that 18 or 24, I don't remember how many there are, you will have changed the people who are in your environment, because if you do some of those things, they'll stay away from you in droves. You'll have changed the things you're willing to listen to. You'll have changed the things you're willing to read and that you're willing to put up with on television. And you will have become a real bothersome person to people who have advertising on television that says ugly things about people of color and women. Now, anything else I can tell you?
I think you touched on it a bit about, the people in your community, how they reacted to it. I was always curious because I watched the videos, plenty of them, how the parents responded to you doing that with their children. How did the parents respond to that?
almost universally, the parents said, Jane, you did a good thing for my kid. They didn't always come to me, but then after I had quit teaching there, I was in the street in Osage, in a building, in a store in Osage one day, and there was a pair of parents walking up and down outside the front of the building. And I thought, why are they walking up and down out there? What's going on? I went out and they said, Jane, we have to tell you, thank you for what you did for our children. And we have to apologize to you for not standing up for you while you were there. I said, that wasn't your job. You didn't have to stand up for me. What they said, we should have. I said, no. And he had tears in his eyes and she's crying. I said, look, you didn't have to stand up for me. I did what I thought was good for children. Those people who disapproved of that will learn eventually, but you weren't responsible for what I did, and you weren't responsible for what they did. They'll have to live with that knowledge. You don't have to. Thank you very much for not asking that I be fired, because a whole bunch of people did. People whose kids hadn't been in my classroom, but people who's had kids in my classroom would go to the principal the next fall and say, I want my kid in Elliott's classroom.
Oh, wow.
Put my child in Elliott's classroom. Yes. And my principal's got that a lot. I want my child in Elliott's classroom. I'll never forget the man who went to the principal, called the principal and said, I don't want my kid in that N-word lover's classroom. I want him to learn to read. So put him in there anyway. So he was willing to take, he was willing to take the bitter with the sweet, because he knew he couldn't teach the kid to read, but he could beat the rest of that nonsense out of him. So he put him in there, and I taught him to read. And I taught him not to use the N-word. And I taught him, I went out on the playground one day when I didn't have playground duty. I went out on the playground to do playground duty. And there were some kids from the other third grade jumping rope. And they had come up with their own jump rhyme. God made the N-word. He made him in the night. He made him in such a hurry, he forgot to make him white.
Oh, wow.
Now, they didn't make that up by themselves. Somebody taught that to them. So I walked over to them and I said, wait a minute, give me the rope. So they gave me the rope and I said, now, here's the way it is. I'm going to take this rope down to the principal, and you won't be allowed to jump rope on this playground while I'm on playground duty until you come up with a better rope jumping rhyme. And if your teacher wants this rope, she needs to go down to the principal and get it. So they told the teacher what I had done. But in the meantime, I went down to the principal and said, this rope was used by the kids on the playground. And I told him the rhyme. He said, that's not right. I said, of course that's not right. And I told the kids, in order to get this rope back, they have to come up with a new rope jumping rhyme. And their teacher is going to come down and complain to you. He said, yes, I suspect she will. I said, well, you do what you want to with this rope. But if I see it on the playground again, and those kids are using that kind of rhyme, I'll take it away from them again. He said, you're absolutely right to do that. I'll take care of it. So I went back to my room. The other teacher went down, complained about what I had done. And the principal said, teach your students another rope jumping rhyme.
Oh, good. He supported you.
And when they learn one, send them in here and they can say it, and then I'll give them back the rope. But if they use that rope jumping rhyme on the playground, it is Mrs. Elliott's duty and your duty to tell them they can't jump rope on the playground until they come up with a better rope jumping rhyme. And that's what they did. They came up with another one, and I'd go out and I'd listen. I'd say, that's a nice rope. Yeah, oh, good for you, And I know that they were thinking, you miserable old witch. And they weren't thinking witch. I know what they were thinking. But you can't allow racist remarks to be made in your presence and claim to be an educator. If you're a teacher, you can do that, because teachers dispense facts and figures and get kids ready for the end of year testing. I'm an educator. The word educator comes from the root duck deuce, which means lead, the prefix e, which means out, the suffix ate, which means the act of, and the suffix or, which means one who does. An educator is one who is engaged in the act of leading people out of ignorance. And you can't do that if you're allowing your students to behave in racist ways and to make racist statements. You can't do it. You're not leading your students out of ignorance. You are perpetuating their ignorance, and you are making it all right to be a racist. It's not all right to be a racist, because a racist is somebody who is so ignorant that he or she believes that the amount of chemical in your skin determines how smart you are and how worthwhile you are as a human being. And it's a lie. And we need to know that. So that's what I do. And that's what I've done. And when I do it with adults, oh my God.
I was going to ask you about that.
Oh, the first time I did it with adults, I did the exercise with my students. I showed my mother those essays. She showed them the editor of the local paper. He printed them in the local paper. A friend of mine, I wasn't a friend of hers at the time, but she read that article and she sent that article into the Johnny Carson show.
Oh.
So they called me from the Johnny Carson show. And I was in my classroom one day and the intercom said, Mrs. Elliott, you're wanted there's a telephone call for you in the office. So I said to the kids, you wait right here. Take care of yourselves. I got to go to the office. So I went to the office. I said, I'll let you know who it is. I got down to the office. They handed me the phone. They said, this is Johnny Carson. I said, oh, okay. And the kids said, who is it? Who is it? I said, it's Johnny Carson, kids. And they said, who's Johnny Carson? I thought, oh, that wasn't the right thing to say. They didn't know who Johnny Carson was. They thought it was Coretta Scott King because we had written sympathy letters to her, and they thought she was calling to say thank you. But instead, it was Johnny Carson. So Johnny Carson wanted me to come in and do the Johnny Carson show. Now, everybody was really impressed. They were really impressed with that. I wasn't impressed because, you see, 2 weeks before I was on the Johnny Carson show, he had on the show somebody who shot a Coke machine because it wouldn't give him the proper change, and somebody who trained chickens and turkeys and rabbits. And I thought, now I'm in really good company. Somebody who shoots a Coke machine and somebody who trains animals. This is a really good opportunity for me to shine among my peers. Well, actually, it was a pretty good opportunity because they were all impressed. So I said, they said, who's Johnny Carson? So I went in and did the Johnny Carson show. After the Johnny Carson show, I got letters from practically every state. And some of those letters were so ugly and so filthy and so abusive that I couldn't show them to my kids. I didn't know how ugly racism was. If you stand up and you're going to be counted, you put your head above the parapet, somebody's going to try to shoot it off. And that's what they tried to do. It was something. My kids from that moment on were abused by their peers, by the teachers, and some of the parents of their peers. My parents lost their business. Nobody would eat in the restaurant owned by the people who raised me. My husband lost the respect of the people in the community. I lost all my so-called friends. I was a member of a bridge club before the exercise. I was a member of a bowling team before the exercise. And then they found a substitute for me on the bowling team and didn't tell me where the bridge club was meeting the next week. So I kind of got the idea that they didn't like what I had done. So after I told my father that, and he said, just smile a lot and they'll wonder what you've been up to. So I walked through the hall smiling, and I'd go home and I'd tell him what was going on. He'd say, let the bitches eat someplace else when they wouldn't eat in his restaurant. Let the bitches eat somewhere else. I didn't want to wait on them anyway. So that's something he didn't ever have to do again. He didn't like to wait on those people who would treat his daughter that way. It has been a real learning experience. I found out, one of the first things I found out was those kids knew every negative stereotype you've ever heard about Black people. They had never been in the presence of one, and there were none in my community.
Right.
And when the boys the men, the so-called men, up at the coffee shop downtown, the coffee stop, found out what I was doing, they said, why is she teaching about racism in Riceville? We don't have any racism in Riceville. We don't have any N-words. In other words, if there aren't any of those people there, you don't have to have racism. But the minute one comes into town, then you have to be scared because that's one of those people. My husband ran a store in Osage, and he had 3 or 4 numbers that he was to call if a Black person came into his store.
Really? Wow.
He was to call these 3 or 4 numbers, other stores in the community, so that he could warn them that there was a Black person in town, just in case they were going to have a lot of shoplifting and a lot of thievery.
Wow.
And he came home and told me that after a couple of years. And I said, Daryl, why didn't you tell me that when it was happening? He said, you had enough problems, Jay. You didn't have to have any more. And I didn't need to want any more. You were already causing us enough problems. I said, yeah, because I put the first group of adults that I put through the exercise were the members of the Rotarians in that community. And at that time, they wanted me to talk to the Rotarians because I had been on the Johnny Carson show. Now, you couldn't be a Rotarian if you were female because you had to have the proper urinary tract to be a Rotarian. You had to be male. Well, I wouldn't be a Rotarian, but I could dance on their tables. So they asked me to come and talk to them about the Johnny Carson show. And I said, shall we put him through the exercise? And the guy who called me said, yeah, let's do it. I said, can you lose your job? He said, no, I'm the boss where I work. I said, fine, let's put him through the blue-eyed, brown-eyed exercise. So we did.
Oh,
after it was over, they were, oh yeah, it got really interesting. After it was over, they had another meeting after, the next week, and they had to vote on who they would have to come and talk to their foreign students over Thanksgiving vacation. And my name came up, and they voted never to let me back in town again as long as I lived. And one of the men who was in that group, oh, he was furious. He was furious. Several years after that, 20 years after I did that exercise in 1968, in the summer of 1968, my husband was invited to join the Masons group. And my grandfather had been a Mason. My father had been a Mason. They invited my husband to be a Mason. So they had a card party, and they invited us to the card party so that the members could meet Daryl's wife. Okay. So as they brought them in, I was sitting at the table, they say that Mr. So-and-so, this is Jane, this is Daryl's wife, and they'd shake hands. And then they brought in this older man. They said, Mr. So-and-so, this is Mrs. Elliott. And he stopped about 6 feet from me. He was socially distancing already. He said, I know exactly who you are. I've never forgotten you, and I've never forgiven you either. I said, what's going on here? What did I do? He said, I'm blue-eyed. And said, and you're a Rotarian. He said, yes, I am. And I've never forgotten you, and I'll never forgive you, and I won't be anywhere near you. And he stormed off to another corner of the room.
Oh, wow.
After that, when he got sick, I'd see him coming toward me on the street, and he'd turn and go in the other direction. He'd cross the street so he wouldn't have to walk on the same street I was walking on. Then he got a motorized he got a motorized wheelchair, and he'd be running that thing up the street, and he'd see me coming, he'd put that thing around in the other direction and go the other direction just as fast as he could. And when he said that to me that night, I said, but Mr. So that happened 20 years ago. You can't still be angry about that. He said, I'm still angry about that. I'll never forgive you, and I'll never forget it, and I'll never forgive you either. Wow. And he never did. Now, that's an hour and a half at a Rotary Club luncheon. Mm-hmm. It was never going to happen to him again. He didn't have to worry about it till the day he died, except when he saw me walking toward him on the street. Mm-hmm. And then he was remembered of the horrible thing that had happened to him. What would he do if he lived through that with that for a lifetime? Mm-hmm. Might he become violent? Mm. Might he become angry? Might he start to act out? He wanted to act out that day. Wow. And the only thing that kept him from acting out was he was at the Masons Club meeting, the Masons Lodge meeting, and he had to try not to explode, but he couldn't do it. He exploded. Mm. And I sat there and I thought, and this is what it's about. You can do this to Black people for a lifetime. And they're supposed to say, yes, sir, yes, boss, yes, boss. And they're supposed to be grateful. And when you do it to a white male for an hour and a half, he can be angry for the rest of his life. And people will think that his anger is justified after an hour and a half as an adult. Yeah. But you can do it to a little Black boy walking across a park with something made of wood in his hand, and a cop can shoot him. And nobody protested. Or you can hold a Black man down, 4 of you can, and one of you can put your knee on his neck and hold him there and watch him die, and look up and see someone videotaping it, and look at the camera, and simply keep on looking at the camera and doing what you're doing, because you know full well that you can get away with killing this young Black man. And then the next week, you can stop one who's gone to sleep in the Wendy's drive-through, and you can take him out of his car and drive his car over to where it belongs, and then you can talk to him for half an hour, and then suddenly decide that you're going to take him downtown, even though he hasn't done anything wrong. Everything's all right now. And because you've decided that you're going to take him downtown, whether he likes it or not, you can wrestle him to the ground, and he can overthrow 2 white policemen, disarm one of them, and instead of turning that weapon on those 2 men and to immobilize them, he can run away so he doesn't commit another crime. And if you're angry enough, you can stand up as a white male and run after him and shoot him in the back twice. And then when he's lying there on the ground dying, you can kick him while he's dying. And you can get away with it. Now, there's something very wrong with that situation. There's something very wrong with allowing that to happen. There's something and I don't want to defund the police. I know that policemen got the same education that the rest of us got. They learned the same lies that everybody else did. And they're going to have to be re-educated. We're going to have to re-educate the population of the United States of America. We're going to have to stop calling this America as if the 48 contiguous states and Alaska and Hawaii and the islands off the southeastern coast of the United States are all there is to America. We're going to have to start realizing that America is everything from the northernmost point of Canada to the southernmost point of South America. Those are all the Americas. We're going to have to start calling this country the U.S. because U.S. is a word, us. This country is about us. It's about all of us. So it's time to get real. It's time to stop using the language from the 16th and 17th century and get into the 21st century and start talking about reality instead of the fantasy that pale faces have created for themselves, because they can create that fantasy for themselves, but it is agony for people of color. This is not a fantasy that people of color are living in. They are living in what's the opposite of a fantasy? What? Give me the opposite of a fantasy. A nightmare. Did you say nightmare? Nightmare ruler. Yeah, this is a nightmare. And we have created a nightmare for from 11 to 30% of our population. Now, here's where the nightmare is going to happen for pale faces. The demographics of this country say that within 30 years, pale faces will have become a numerical minority in the United States of America. And that's the reason that white woman is so afraid that she is going to be treated the way she has treated others.
Yes.
And they will teach you. They will teach you the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have others do unto you. And I say to a group of people, well, every white person in this room who believes in the golden rule, because we believe in the golden rule, who wants to, every white person in this room who wants to be treated for the rest of their lives the way we have treated people of color, particularly blacks and Native Americans. If that's what you want, will you please stand? Not one person stands, because they know they don't want to be treated the way they've treated others.
Right.
We do not practice the golden rule. We treat others the way we want to treat them, not the way they want to be treated. I don't believe in the golden rule. I believe in the platinum rule. And the platinum rule says, do unto others as others would have you do unto them. Treat others the way they want to be treated. Yeah. I know that no tall young male wants to be treated the way I want to be treated. I know when I get on an airplane, if I have a piece of luggage to put in the overhead rack, if some male says to me, can I put that up for you, ma'am? I say, thank you very much. You had some good parents. He said, no problem. I'm just glad to do it for you. However, if he has a piece of luggage to put in the overhead rack and I say to him, can I put that up for you, Sonny? He'll say, I can handle this myself. I say, sorry, I was just trying to treat you the way I want to be treated. Well, I don't want to be treated that way. He doesn't want to be treated that way, and I don't have the right to treat him that way. I have to treat him how he wants to be treated, and in order to find out how he wants to be treated, I have to ask him. I have to listen to the answer, and then if what he asks me to do is indecent, immoral, or illegal, I have to do it. But you see, that means I have to communicate with him.
Yes.
I can't just automatically believe that I'm going to treat him the way I want to be treated, because I know I'm not.
Yes.
And I can't automatically believe that if I would treat him the way I want to be treated, I'm not sure that's the way he wants to be treated.
Yeah.
If I offer him a cup of tea, they look at me like I've slapped him across the face. I offered a man in Riceville several years ago a cup of tea. He came to the house for something, and he ran a trucking line. And I said, well, let's have a cup of tea. And he looked at me and he said, well, I've never done that. And he sat down, and I made a pot of tea, and I poured in a cup of tea, and he said, okay. And he drank it, and he said, well, that's okay. I said, I'm glad you like it. And he went uptown. He said, she offered me a cup of tea, and I had to sit there and drink tea like some nanny. There I sat drinking tea, and I thought, You silly fool. Tea was before coffee. Grown men in lots of countries drink lots of tea.
Yes.
I was absolutely shocked at his negative reaction to being offered a cup of tea. He thought I had emasculated him by asking him to drink a cup of tea. My husband drank it. He enjoyed tea, you know. Oh, yeah, it's a lot cheaper than coffee.
Yes.
And you can have it hot or cold. It's wonderful. Tea is a wonderful drink. And if you're sick, you drink tea. If you're sick, you don't drink coffee, you're going to get sicker. But you drink tea. It's a wonderful thing, tea is.
Yeah.
But he just thought he'd been asked to do something really kind of effeminate to drink tea in the middle of the day like that. I thought, oh my God, what have I done? This has been an interesting last 52 years. I've learned things I didn't want to know.
Wow. Wow. I was going to ask you, do you keep in touch with any of the students that you did that with? Have they ever came back and told you different things that kind of changed their life in regards to how they deal with people?
I got a letter from one today. I got an email from one today thanking me for what I taught him and the wonderful things we got to do when he was in junior high when he was in my classroom. And he said, you taught me to read and you taught me to do all these exciting things. And I want to thank you for what you taught me. He said, I've been a teacher for 27 years.
Oh, wow. Wow. Wow.
And he said, I'm doing that because I remember a teacher. I remember a good teacher. So I've had parents of kids who have been through the exercise come up to me as parents and say, I wish my son was learning what you taught. And parents said to me after that was over, one of the parents said to me, thank you for what you did for my son. I said, what did I do for your son? She said, we used to hate to see him get off the bus. He was mean to his little sister. He was just awful. She said, now after the exercise, we're glad to see him get off the bus. And he's even nice to his little sister because he found out, and he was one of the brightest kids I ever taught. He had it all, looks and height and brain and personality. But he was a nasty kid at home. He was perfect in the classroom. And she said, he's a different child since you did that exercise. I've had many parents say to me, you changed our life at home. Thank you very much. My husband doesn't tell black jokes anymore because the kids won't put up with it.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Men should be careful of what they say around their children because they'll come to school and they'll repeat some of the things their fathers have said. And then I'll know what the father is all about. And then I will really teach their children that here are some things we do not say, boys and girls. And if you hear anyone say these things, you have the right to say, are you sure you're right about that? And I say, but listen to me. Do not argue with your father as long as you put your feet under his dining room table. Mm-hmm. He knows more than you do. But if he's making racist remarks, he doesn't know enough. So you wait until you're old enough. You wait until you grow up, and then you can go back and tell your father what you thought of that. And then he'll listen to you. He won't listen to you now. But they do listen to them when they're little because they're afraid that they'll come to school and tell me the things their fathers say. So then they just
That's so funny.
Hey, whatever it takes, you have to confront racism where you encounter it.
Well, that's teaching accountability.
Who was it said? The only thing necessary for the perpetuation of evil is for good people to do nothing. Mm-hmm. The only thing necessary for the perpetuation of evil is for good people to do nothing. And I think it's now, and it has been for a long time to, instead of teaching the 3 R's of reading, writing, and arithmetic, only one word of which begins with R, which is reading. Writing begins with a W, and arithmetic begins with an A. So those aren't the 3 R's unless you can't pronounce them. You can't spell and you can't pronounce those words right.
Right.
I think we need to teach the 3 R's of rights, respect, and responsibility. And it is the responsibility of every one of us to respect the rights of everyone else. And I get really unpleasant about my pale-faced cousins who abuse or talk in an ugly way about my cousins of other color groups. Because those are my cousins. Those are my people. You may not want to be my people, but that's the way it is. And under the skin, we aren't all the same. You and I aren't the same. I will probably never be exposed. I'll never have to worry about sickle cell anemia. Mm-hmm. I'll never have to worry about hot flashes again. And men, generally speaking, don't have to worry about that ever. So we aren't the same under the skin, and we don't have to be the same under the skin. But every one of us, regardless of what we are under the skin, have the right to expect to be treated, have our rights respected, and to be held responsible for respecting the rights of others.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Yes. Yes. I saw I saw in the interview, and I'll let you go soon because I know I could talk to you all night. I told you I was so excited to talk to you. So, but I saw
you haven't talked yet. You haven't talked yet. You could listen to me all night. You don't get a chance to talk. The minute you give me a chance to talk, I take it and I run with it because I'm really tired of this whole mess. I'm tired of it. Go on. What were you going to say? You saw an interview. What was it? What did you learn?
Well, I saw that you said that you were surprised that people were reaching back out to you after all these years about the brown-eyed, blue-eyed, thing that you did. So why were you so surprised? Did you think it was kind of over, or did you think that it was irrelevant now, or?
Oh no. I thought when Barack Obama was elected,
okay,
I thought people have gotten smart. It's going to be okay. I can put down this thing I've got going because people understand we're getting smarter. Mm-hmm. And when he got reelected, I thought, that proves it. People are beginning to accept one another as equal human beings. And then a fool, and I mean a fool,
mm-hmm.
put his name on the ballot. And a bunch of people in electoral colleges who didn't know why Thomas Jefferson puts the Electoral College into the Constitution decided to select our present leader. Now, Thomas Jefferson put the Electoral College into the Constitution so that if the vote went to a person who was unfit for the presidency, the Electoral College was supposed to put a stop on it. It was up to the members of the Electoral College to see to it that no one who was unfit for the presidency would ever be elected to that job. But exactly the opposite happened in 2016?
Yes.
And so here we are with something that feels Hitlerian, because one of the books that this president holds dear is the writings of Adolf Hitler. And if that doesn't scare you, I don't know what will. We cannot afford to have this Pied Piper pipe us through the hole in the wall, because it's going to close behind us and we are going to be in really bad shape. This is the worst I've ever seen this country. I've never seen us on the brink of losing our democracy, but we are right now.
Yeah.
And what we have to do now is make sure that every single person who is old enough to vote get to the polls, and do not let anyone stop you from voting. Get every person of age to the polls and vote somebody into office who cares about the future of every person in the U.S., us, who cares about all of us.
Yes. Well, Dr. Elliott, I'm so happy to have had this conversation with you, and to be able to listen to you and just kind of, get your take on then and now. I just really appreciate the work that you've done. And like I said, I've watched it, I followed it, and it's just been amazing. So again, thank you so much for your time. Let's see, A Class Divided.
Get this book.
Okay.
It was written by William Peters, and it's a description of what he saw the times that he filmed that exercise. And the last two chapters he talks about, he compares and he filmed it with the Iowa Department of Corrections, adults, and he compares their behavior during the exercise to the behavior of the children during the exercise. You have to read this book. And then everybody has to read The Rage of a Privileged Class by Ellis Coles.
Okay.
If you don't read the whole thing, read the chapter called The Dozen Demons. These are 12 things that every black male has to go through every day, not because of the color of his skin, but because of the ignorance of people who see his skin color as a negative. Just listen to some of the things. Inability to fit in, exclusion from the club, low expectations. They come through the classroom door and the white teacher and the black teacher automatically expect them not to succeed. Shattered hopes. You've got hopes. Your mother sends you out with hopes, and the people in the school kill those hopes. Faint praise. You talk real good for a black person. I call that faint praise and ignorance. Presumption of failure. We're quite certain that they aren't going to make it. Coping fatigue. I don't know how black women stand it. They develop coping skills that I have never developed because I've never had to. But black males do. They do because they have to. Pigeonholing. Here is what you're capable of doing, and that's all you're ever going to be capable of doing. It's a lie. Identity troubles. Oh my God. Those guys, self-censorship and silence. Keep your mouth shut when somebody says, you talk real good for a black person. Don't say to them, you mean I talk very well for a person with darker skin. Isn't that what you mean? No, I mean you talk real good for a black. The word is well, not good. Mendacity, in other words, the ability to lie in order to be accepted by the pale faces. You have to become mendacious. You have to be willing to lie. You have to be willing to say, no, I wasn't offended. No, I wasn't offended by that. Don't worry about it. When somebody says, did I offend you? I'm sorry. You'll have to say, no, I wasn't offended by that. I understand you. That's mendacity, and you shouldn't have to do it. You shouldn't have to develop those skills in order to be a functioning human being in the United States of America. But I'm not angry, you understand.
No, I'm glad you touched on that point, because a lot of people have made those statements during this time right now with all the riots and protesting. You know, people say, well, I don't understand why you guys are angry. I don't understand why you have to do this. And people don't understand lifelong trauma.
No, because they've never had it. And They think they never will. But they're also afraid that if you're successful at this protest, that they're going to have to stand it sooner than 30 years. They need to know they'd better get into the habit of accepting women and people of all colors in positions of power in this country, because that's what's going to be available to run this country. White males don't live long. I know. My husband's been dead for almost 7 years. And I'm still out here doing this. Yeah. And my son died 2 years ago.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, because if you're white, you have to be right. And you work harder and you die of stress-related diseases for the most part, because you are trying to prove that you are better than you are. And that puts a horrible stress on white males and on their wives and their mothers.
That's an interesting
point. We
don't
think of it that way. Yeah. We only think of the fact that we know very well that we send black males to fight our wars in wartime. In peacetime, we make war on them in this country.
Wow. Yeah.
So I have company for supper, and they're getting supper, and we're going to have Iowa sweet corn on the cob. Corn on the cob with butter and salt and pepper on it, and I'm going to be as big as a mountain by morning. So thank you for the interview. So I don't know what you're going to do with this, but I hope you aren't going to sell it, because if you do, you have to pay me.
No. I'm not going to sell it. I can guarantee you that.
Good. I don't care if you give it away, just don't sell it. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. You enjoy your company and you enjoy your dinner. And thank you so much. Have a great evening.
I will. You're welcome for anything I've done. Did you learn anything?
Oh, I learned plenty. And when I'm down in Iowa again, I have to come visit you.
Hey, where are you from? Where do you live?
I live in Michigan. My son
in Iowa again. Stop at my house. We have a little old Baptist church next door that we turned into a guest house. It is lovely. It was built in 1989 or something. And there it is. And we turned it into a guest house. And I have people staying in it right now. And they like it.
Okay.
They get to see deer in the backyard. It's great. So we'll see you again. All right?
Yes, ma'am. You have a great evening. Thank you so much.
You too. You're welcome. Thank you. Bye now.